The World Bank says there is a food crisis in Nigeria and it's getting bad, while Mr. President says we are achieving food security. So what and who do we believe? Also, the chairman of the ruling APC, Adams Ashomole, has urged the citizens of Nigeria to boycott products and services of South African firms in Nigeria. Can we survive on our own? This is Plus Politics, and I am Mary Anna Cone. The World Bank yesterday warned that Nigeria's food security crisis or food crisis has reached an alarming dimension, blaming the development largely on poor policies of successive administrations in the country. This actually contradicts President Muhammadu Buhari's statement, who directed the Central Bank of Nigeria in August 2019 to stop the provision of foreign exchange for the importation of food, saying his administration has achieved food security. And my question again is, who do we believe or what do we believe? But to discuss this with me this evening, I'm being joined by Rahman Adebiyi. He's a political or public affairs analyst. It's good to have you join us.
Thank you very much.
And of course, we have Lulu Elegwe. He is a political analyst. It's good to have you join us.
Hi.
All right, so every time we talk about food security or anything that has to do with food, agriculture comes to play. And a lot of lip service has been paid to agriculture in Nigeria. Several governments, successive governments, have tried to pay a little attention to it, and sometimes it looks like it's growing and sometimes it looks like it's stagnant. But I'll start with you, Lulu. If the World Bank is saying that what's happening, he says that the food crisis is taking a frightening dimension, does that not contradict what Mr. President told us last month?
Well, it does, and it should worry anybody, really, because from what we know about the World Bank, they don't make certain types of statements just like that. Mm-hmm. They don't make it without backing. So, I understand what the president or what this administration has tried to do over the last 4 or 5 years in terms of agriculture and food. Mm-hmm. We're not there yet, but he's done a lot, excuse me, a lot better than his predecessors in that regard. But when he says Nigeria has achieved food security, I don't believe there's anyone who actually believes that. Yes, we are on the right track in terms of getting there, but are we there yet? No, I don't believe we are. So I think that was a premature statement to make. If he was saying that just because he didn't think it made any sense for forex concessions to be available for importing food, then I can understand that argument. But if you're saying the real argument is because we've achieved food security, then that doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, some business and economic analysts I've listened to have said that, well, Mr. President didn't succinctly say, that because they want to believe that we do not have food security. In fact, we're still struggling with issues such as cooperatives for the farmers, we have issues of storage, we have issues, so many issues that we have not yet addressed. And I'm wondering, every time a government, whether it is an Obasanjo-led or Yaradua, Jonathan or Buhari-led government says, oh, we're changing gears to agriculture, we want to try as much as possible to make it an income earner for us, is that just a political statement, or they really do mean it because they want to change what is in the plates on the tables of every Nigerian?
Yeah, the government that is able to achieve that statement is a government that truly loves Nigerians.
How do you mean? Every government says they love Nigeria. They're doing everything they do
I'm saying
in the best interest of Nigerians.
From the background of, if you're able to achieve that, because before the oil boom, agriculture was our mainstay. And the oil boom came and diluted the oil equation, and then everybody left to the lush money. And for us to survive as a people, we must be able to feed ourselves. But are we able to feed ourselves now? No, because the workforce of Nigeria is dominated by about 71% into the agricultural sector, because people in the hinterland who does peasant farming, and of course we're trying to move into mechanized farming.
We have actually, somewhat.
Yeah, no, not in that large scale across all board. But the question is, how well is the policy of government in trying to improve agriculture? How well has it improved? It's all a challenge of policy somersaults here and there, because a regime will come, will keep up a policy, and they won't implement up to a higher degree. Before you know it, another government regime will come and upturn it, and they'll begin a new one. Another one will come, begin a new one. So that has hindered us as a people in growing. And the funding into agriculture is not the best. It's about 7% there about now, and we need to upscale that.
And this is why I ask, because every time maybe the oil benchmark drops, or there's a problem with the oil, we start saying, oh, we're divesting the economy, we're going to put money into agriculture. And for me, I just smile on the side of my face, because I know that once the oil benchmark comes back to a better, we forget about it. So whether we like it or not, Nigeria keeps growing every other day on a large scale, and we have almost the same people still farming or providing food.
The question we need to ask ourselves is, can we feed ourselves as a people? When we talk about,
the president says yes.
When we talk about food security, it's not that you don't cultivate and harvest, but you harvest enough. And when you do that, the storage is what keeps it going, because it means that some food will be available all year round. And how can you guarantee that? The only way you can guarantee that is to ensure that you don't go the next step of the value chain, process, packaging, storage, and what have you. But Nigeria has not been able to upscale that level as we speak, because majority of the people providing food are staple food, from the yam to the other ones. They are still the peasant farmer. The people who come into large-scale mechanized farming in Nigeria are going into some areas in which, maybe not a lot of Nigerians are looking at that, because we want to hear, how do you want to preserve our yam, that we can eat yam all year round? So we won't start having New Yam festivals coming up and we're waiting for the new yam to happen. We want to have yam year round. And so many our tomatoes you see in the market. You go to the market in a particular month, the tomatoes are very cheap. You go to the market another month, the tomatoes are very expensive. So why can't we have a stable price for all those things? It's because that value chain has not been well established. And for government saying that, yes, we have achieved food security, for you to achieve food security, then the value chain must be complete. Every Nigerian must have food on their table. The hunger level must be reduced to the barest minimum. And a very good example is they're trying to weave a system of food for the children to reduce malnutrition. Mm-hmm. If they've been able to do that very well, integrate all that, then Nigeria will become sustainable. Because one thing about food security is sustainability. If you cannot sustain it, then you can't guarantee and tell anybody that you have achieved food security for the nation.
Okay, and this is why a lot of people have argued on this. But Lulu, every time the issue of farming or agriculture is brought to the table, although today we see a lot of people who have become agricultural entrepreneurs, but the percentage of those people are not as many compared to the peasant farmers. Mm-hmm. Could it also be that we have somewhat relegated agriculture to the background, even in our schools, and we're still teaching the hoe and the machete kind of agriculture, hence the reason why a lot of people who probably think it's best to have a white collar or blue collar job do not see the need to go into agriculture? Maybe we should start looking in that direction.
Yeah, so I mean, when we talk about excuse me, I just see that word diversification. I think it's just a nice word in Nigeria. It doesn't mean a lot, because diversifying the economy it's not a question of jumping from oil to agriculture. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. It's never worked that way. Because with what you mentioned, for example, it almost takes a mentality shift and a change to understand the importance of agriculture. If Nigeria as a country could sustain itself before the oil boom, mm-hmm. with agriculture, you can imagine what would happen if that same level of involvement of agriculture in the economy was taken side by side with oil, you can imagine what that would mean for the country. But the reality is that most people still see farming as, like you said, someone takes cutlass and a hoe and goes to the farm. But if some of the richest people in the US, for example, actually run farms. They don't do much else beyond that. But the problem here is, when you talk about agriculture entrepreneurs, these are educated people, they've gone to school, they've realized, okay, there are gaps here, I can do X, Y, Z. The problem is that those people might be more visible, they might be more vocal, but they're still in the minority. That's the reality. The majority is still the people in the villages, in those small towns, who farm primarily for their families and maybe their villages or their communities.
Just to sell, yeah.
Exactly, and that's still where the majority of agricultural activities take place in Nigeria. For anything like food security to be achieved, that ratio needs to change. It's not something that's going to open overnight. It's certainly not something that's going to happen in 4 or 5 years.
What about investments in these small-scale farming to make it become large-scale farming? Like you said, in the US or in other places, one person can own hectares and hectares of land.
Absolutely.
And it's not just, and they call it a farm, it's not just what they get from the ground, but they also have ranches in those places. They were all so. Why haven't we come up? Because, like I said, we have these agricultural entrepreneurs who have found gaps, you know, because it's not just about farming, but the link all the way to when it gets to your table. Yeah. Why are we not investing more in those areas to grow the food chain?
It's simple. We don't see it as a big enough priority. It's just that simple. Because, see, anything that any government, let's even forget the Nigerian government, anything that any government sees as a priority, they will find a way to fund it. It's that simple. Because, like you mentioned earlier, the only time we get serious about funding for agriculture is when there's an issue with oil prices. And the minute those oil prices get to where we want them to get, we forget about it again. But unless we see this as, you know what, this is not a diversification issue, this is not a secondary income issue, this is a national emergency issue. Apart from the food shortage, there's also the fact that at some point, Nigeria's oil is not going to be what it is today. At some point, and it will happen at some point. So if we're doing this yo-yo of we're interested in agriculture today, we're not interested tomorrow, we're not going to get anywhere. And that's why it's been quite slow, because we tend, again, like you said, we don't see agriculture for what it actually should be or what it actually is. Because if someone, I have a friend, for example, who he's a banker, where he owns a farm somewhere in Ogun State. He goes there almost every weekend. Well, he was a banker. He's quit his banking job now to face the farming full time, because he felt like there was no way he could give it the energy that it needed if he wasn't doing it full time. Now, he's done it to a level where he's no longer, he's hired people that work there. He has agreements with a number of supermarket chains, those sorts of things, outside Nigeria. So if we can get to that point, you can imagine what that does for the economy, what that does for the individual, what that does for the economy as well. But as long as that mentality is still, farming is this dirty village man's job, then we're not going to go anywhere. So when the president starts talking about food security, if any of those things don't change, we're not achieving it. Like he said earlier, it's not just a question of there's food. I remember, I think it was 3 years ago when there was that tomato crisis when everyone thought it was. But everyone, it looks like you had issues.
Oh, yes. I literally had to send money to Jos to get my own basket.
Yeah, and that's that's part of the point he was making earlier about storage, for example, or even something as simple, well, maybe not simple, something like pest control. Because a lot of people thought at the time that the recession was what caused the tomato issue, but it wasn't. It was pests pests that destroyed about 90% of the tomato that was produced nationally at the time. So how can we say that we've achieved food security when we've not even dealt with those sorts of issues? If we have crops that we're saying we've achieved food security, so we have these crops. What happens if those pests ravage all those things again? What happens at that point?
It's crazy. So let's talk about the business of agriculture, because I think the world has moved past where we are.
Far away.
And it's not that we don't have an idea that there is a business of agriculture. We know. Why haven't we? Because you see, we have all these conferences and agricultural expos. I mean, we even live on glories such as, countries like Asian countries came here and took our palm fruits and, so if we know that we were able to do these things at a certain time when there was no technology, and now there is technology that is not so expensive if, there is some form of subsidy from the government, why are we not taking advantage of it? And I'm not even talking about the government now, I'm talking about private individuals like he's mentioned.
Yeah, the Nigerians are taking advantage. The question is, the environment must be enabling. There must be, and when you say enabling environment, there must be security, there must be good road, there must be electricity, and there must be the other chain of support. Technology needs power and the storage and what have you, and then the exports, because government has an intervention to protect them, to ensure that the goods coming in, the tariffs are somewhat higher so that they can protect them to grow. So when you talk agribusiness is a wide range of business that everybody can key into at different points. And the element of agribusiness that we need to feed our people, from crops to animals. When you look at the animals, you look at the elders' challenge that we find ourselves. The ranching is a solution, but how well are we achieving the ranch to to encapsulate that major sector?
That seems to have been taken over by events.
Exactly.
To put it mildly.
Yeah, exactly.
To put it mildly,
exactly.
yes.
So that is a major challenge that we have not been able to solve, which I think we should solve it quickly, so that because we have to guarantee that our people have good meat at all time, and the crops element.
We seem to forget about the sea animals, because we also have
when you talk about
contamination.
The sea, yes,
because that's a form of farming, fishery.
Yeah, the challenge of the sea for Nigeria is that the effluent is affecting a lot of things. The regulatory authority need to regulate the oil companies, putting a lot of toxic material.
What about us? Emptying our trash into the ocean, and the fishes get to eat, and then they find themselves on our plates again. So it seems like a big problem that we're not dealing with. That's part of the ecosystem of that. But the truth is, in the agribusiness, everybody must key in. Because why do we need to key in? We need to key in because as somebody who is educated, you bring your skill set to the table. The people in the villages who don't have the capacity, you need to support them to increase capacity. Take, for instance, if you paint a scenario of the man in the village has a large scale of land. Yes. You need to cultivate. You have come up with your capacity, knowledge, and you're imputing into supporting him. You have credit from government, and the other guy has a market that is going to guarantee that produce. Do you understand? Before you know it, the chain will become complete, and the business element of that will begin to grow. And as it's growing, you're feeding your people, which is the immediate community, and you're even becoming an export nation of those produce. So it will end the country foreign exchange. And before you know it, the balance of trade will begin to favor you. Take, for instance, how do we solve rice problem? Rice is a major staple food because the grain market is one of the most challenged, ravaged market in the world. Now, Nigeria has an opportunity of growing a lot of rice. But how are we faring? Yes, we're trying now, because the policy of government now says that, yes, we're trying to some degree to become we're not exporting yet, but at least we're trying to show. But how many of us eat rice that we produce in Nigeria?
A lot.
How many of us? Because
I'll tell you why.
Most of the rice that we eat is not necessarily rice. I mean, seriously, if you go to the houses of those of us who feel that we're affluent, what do we eat? Basmati rice and all of those things. Well, how many of us eat the Abakaliki rice, for example?
The people you are talking about are in minority. That's the truth, because they are the people with a lot of taste for foreign. And for Nigeria, the mass people...
But those are also the people who have the purchasing power more.
How many are they in terms of the large number of 200 million? They are about 1% of 200 million. So we're talking about the 190 million Nigerians that need to eat, 190 million Nigerians that need to put food on their table. And, you know, by the time we begin to address all these product by product development, tomato is a large segment of the market that we need to guarantee. Yam, like that. Then the cassava and the garri, the flour, a lot. We need to have a policy direction that will begin to make chief of a product and see how best we can take it to the tail end. And, you know, the challenge we have is the enabling environment is still a challenge. Government is battling with building roads, generating power.
Should that be a battle? Because, for example, I mean, let's say for my people who make palm oil and garri, for taking that garri from my local government area to the city,
it's costable.
Is a challenge. Sometimes they have accidents and they lose half of the produce. But should it be a problem for the government? Because these are basic amenities. Why are we still in the year 2019 talking about road infrastructure? That's
it. When the government of the day, I think I heard in one of the economic recovery plan they have, is they're trying to improve access to farms. Because if you want to ensure that you guarantee that the products get to the market, because some products are perishable, like the tomatoes, and the garri itself is, yes, when it gets hit by water and the rest, it becomes bad. But how can you guarantee that the product is safe all through? The roads must be good. The security system must be good. There must not be bandits or people that hijack or insecurity challenge on the road. Everything starts and stems from an ecosystem that is complete. Security, good road, access to credit, technology, storage, the market is there, that is consuming it locally, internationally, export is guaranteed. The export process becomes simplified for even the average man to understand.
I think we should focus more on making sure that every Nigerian has food before we talk about export. Now, let's talk about value adding to products. You know, like you said earlier on, we're just interested in, most people just harvest their vegetable and sell so that they can put food on their table. Yeah. What about value adding? How do we make sure that this vegetable is not just for the people in your community, where this is where storage comes in? Do we have storage facilities? No. Why are we not coming up with these ideas of, you know, building our own storage facilities apart from refrigerating fish and beef?
It's a combination of factors, unfortunately. So when you talk about moving produce from the farm to the market, for example, and a lot of our problems go around in circles, or it's almost a domino effect. We have bad roads, it affects life security, it affects lives, it affects food movement, it affects all sorts of things. So until the roads are fixed, that will always be an issue. So they don't even have to have farming in mind to fix the roads, but the roads need to be fixed for other reasons. But if the roads get fixed, by default, it fixes that part of the problem. Yeah. And so there's so many of these things that go around the country that we need to sort out. That's one part of the problem. Now, another part of the problem, I was at a forum maybe a year ago, something like that, and a friend, well, my cousin, he runs this export-import council thing in Abuja. I can't remember the name. But basically what they do is they're part of it. They have a government contract where they certify goods that are exported from Nigeria, non-oil goods that are exported out of the country. And I was doing some consulting work for them, and it was an eye-opener for me because there are certain products that grow. Nigeria is one of the leading producers in terms of availability of some products. But what I found was that the countries that consume many of those the largest consumers of some of those products don't buy them from Nigeria. So we export them to, say, Mexico or India or China, or not China, but one of those countries. And then EU countries, the US, they buy from those countries, not from Nigeria. Why? because there's a certain standard, that there's a minimum standard that they'll accept in their markets, which for reasons I don't quite understand, we never seem to get. So the merchants in, say, Mexico, right? I remember the Mexico one because I did a lot of reading on that particular one then. The merchants in Mexico buy those products from Nigeria, and I don't know what sort of processes they take them through there. But if you
so they make them fit for the other markets.
Exactly. For some reason I don't quite understand, we don't do that here. And I'm not sure why that is. So those things happen in, so when you see, you then see a disparity between the largest producers of certain products and the countries that actually get rich from certain products.
Wow.
They get rich from it because they're buying directly, they're selling directly to the end consumers.
And this is also the same thing. We have oil, but we never really refine our oil, so we're losing.
Yeah, so this is so I think it goes to my earlier point that
it beats me. Why can't we just do one thing right?
That's a good question.
Yeah, it beats me because we have it. It's not that we don't have it, but it's just the follow through. Why is that such a challenge for us as a country?
You're beginning to put answers to the questions. Is take one item and follow it through from beginning to the end. Why were we a producing nation? But do we produce? When you produce, it's good. But when you now begin to turn those produce into product, then that helps you. Take, for instance, cocoa is here. When you order your chocolate now, I'm sure you mentioned all those foreign brands. But when cocoa is produced here, and they produce a chocolate that is made from Malaysia or somewhere in the state, and you're proud to be associated with it, you are already helping Nigeria grow. So we need to begin to turn our produce into commodities, into different things that the Western world will desire. And we just need to take the standard and,
Hopefully we can get to that point. Hopefully, maybe, I don't know, by some chance we will automatically get the grace to follow through on anything in this country. But I want to thank you, Bakwan Adebi and Lulu Eligwe, for speaking with us. We appreciate it. Well, they're not going anywhere. We'll go on a short break, and when we return, we'll be discussing the APC chairman who has said that we should boycott businesses of South Africa in Nigeria. We'll be back after the break.